Happy New Year! How's it going? This is Dave from the Character Animator team, and in today's episode we're going to start with our community spotlight and show you 3 very cool examples, including one sent in from a user that has a stop motion claymation quality to it, and I'll show you exactly how he achieved that effect. Then we'll move on to the 3 most common rigging questions. These are the questions that I'm answering over and over again in the comments or the forums. So if you walk through these 3 steps, if you're having issues with your head coming off or your body warping in weird ways as you're moving your character, hopefully running through these steps will help you. Then we'll move on to smoother head turns, how to combine cycle layers and head turner behavior together to get frame-by-frame animation as you move between different head positions. We'll then move into alternate recording styles to show you a few different ways to record the eyes moving around as well as the mouth shapes. And then finally we'll end with a live sketched look, how to have a kind of cycle layers moving sketchbook look to make it look like you have a drawing that's coming to life. So all that's in this month's episode, so let's get started. Last month we featured Look Creative Studios, and you may remember the guy on the left being featured, but now they've moved on and done a ton of new puppets, and they're actually offering freelance services making puppets for other people. So it's very, very cool to see all the different stuff they're doing, and one thing in particular I love is how they're dealing with the mouths. You'll notice that all these mouths are a little bit different, but they're using some really smart cycle layers to make the mouth animation seem very smooth and fluid, and it just works really, really well. So continued great work from these guys, and if you're interested and want professional made character animator puppets, check out their website. It's very, very cool stuff. This is a great interactive puppet sent in by Sorry About Your Cat, both on Twitter and Beam, the game streaming service. And this is a great interactive Link from Legend of Zelda, and I've seen a few streams where he's actually used this character in a side window as he's doing various game streams. So very, very cool to see. And actually, I caught a part of a stream they were doing where they were just fooling around with Character Animator for about 4 hours and making all these characters that I've created do really crazy and obscene things. But it was pretty awesome to see. So very cool use of live streaming with Character Animator. And then finally, we've got this really cool stop motion claymation style character sent in by David Taub. And this is really awesome. He basically created a clay or molded version of this character and was able to kind of rig it to look in kind of a stop motion version. So he did it and dynamic linked it to After Effects and did this whole scene where it was an advertisement for a production of the Nutcracker. And so this older guy is telling you about kind of the story and the history behind it. And it's really well done. It comes off looking pretty close to what you would expect for, a realistic stop motion animation. So a couple of tricks if you're going for a similar stop motion style look. One of the things that works really well is if you lower the frame rate to something like 12 FPS. And you can do that by clicking on your scene over here in the project panel and then changing the frame rate to something like 12. And that makes it feel a little bit more jittery, less smooth, but that can give some really nice stop motion quality results. And then the puppet file, it was just, taking all the pieces and putting them together. So you'll notice even for the blinks, he's got this molded eyes shut. Same with every mouth shape is molded in a different way. And so he just pieced them together and lined them up in the Photoshop file. So it's extremely cool to see this. And I think it gets a great result that probably would have taken a lot more time doing it with traditional stop motion animation, but you get pretty good results doing it this way through Character Animator, so really nice job. Rigging a puppet can sometimes get complicated. The most common issue that I see pop up in the forums or YouTube comments or what have you is a character not moving the way you'd expect. So you move one thing and the body doesn't follow, or you move an arm and it's distorting the body or the head in a strange way. I'm going to show the top 3 issues that I see pop up in the forums and comments and try to solve them here. So if you're running into distortion or bending or movement issues with your character, I'd check out these 3 steps first. The first issue I'll see a lot is, hey, my head's moving, but my body isn't following. Or if I drag one hand, it's working okay, but then if I drag the other, it's distorting or moving my character in a certain way. So usually this is born out of independence being incorrectly applied or not applied to a particular part. So these little crowns here denote independent parts. And as we've said before in other videos, independence just means things can move on their own. So if you have the head independent, meaning it has a crown here, well, then it's going to move independently. So it's not going to affect anything else, including the body. So if you see a crown next to your head or body, get rid of it because you don't want independence for those parts. And if you'll notice, once I've turned it off, now the head and body are moving as expected. Now with the arm issue, why is this one moving and this one is distorting and bending the body and the arm and the face and all that stuff? Well, that's because one arm is independent and one isn't. And so if I twirl down the body group here, I'll see that my left arm, the one that was working as I would expect correctly, is independent, while the right arm is not, meaning when I pull and drag that arm, it's going to affect the whole rest of the body and distort it in weird ways. So if I make that independent again and go back to my scene, then this is going to work a lot more like I would expect. So the most common thing I see is people going independent overload, adding independence everywhere. And that's either the crowns in Character Animator or a plus symbol in your original Photoshop or Illustrator file. The second issue that I see a lot is distortion when dragging. So I've added draggables to the hands here, and when I drag, I get some really weird distortion. I get this triangle thing, and the body's just acting really strange. So there's a couple ways to combat this. First, if I switch through the background colors here, I'll notice that I actually have this stray artwork layer. So maybe I was working on the socks or something like that and I left this over on the side. Well, if you have any artwork on the sides or off this canvas or anything that is left over, even if you hide it with the eyeball toggle visibility, it's still going to be calculated as part of the puppet. So you want to delete any unnecessary layers in your master artwork file because those are going to get calculated as part of the puppet otherwise. Now another way to combat this is to change the layer mesh style. So if I select my main character here and I turn on show mesh down here, I can see how my character's bending is calculated. And right now it's being bent as a giant rectangle, moving rectangle, and that's probably not what I want. So if I go to layer mesh over here and change from auto to contour, so changing that to contour is actually changing the mesh from a giant rectangle to just around the contours of the artwork. And if I go back into my scene now, then the bending is a little bit better. It's not doing that distortion. The third and probably most common issue that I see is when things are not tagged or organized in the correct way. So that leads to issues like this, where the character's right eye is looking okay, but the left eye isn't moving. So something isn't tagged correctly. So first off, you always want this structure. You always want a main group with your character's name and make that independent, and then have your head and body inside that main group. You wouldn't believe how many times I see a body that's outside of that main folder, or the first part isn't independent or anything like that. Make sure your structure looks exactly like this for the best results. Now secondly, if I go in here, I can see that the left pupil, the one that was giving me trouble, actually isn't tagged as a left pupil, and that's because I imported it as L pupil. And I should have written the whole thing out as left pupil. But that's an easy fix. I can go over to my little face diagram here and just click on the pupil, and now that will be fixed. And so now my character's eyes are both moving at the same time. One last thing to check though is if I click this very top level puppet here, so it should say your character's name and how many behaviors it has, and then I'll see all the master behaviors that are automatically applied to my character. So these are the basic things you always see with a character, like face, eye gaze, dangle, all that stuff. And if I go into my face here and actually go to the handles twirl down menu, I can see how many handles have been added to my character for each of these parts. And so I noticed something weird here. My head actually has 2 handles associated with it, and I probably only want to see one of those because my character only has one head. So I can use this to help troubleshoot. If I see more than one of these, or 0 of these, then it's possible that I'm missing a part or I need to take a tag away. In this case, I named my character's head, the background part, the skin of their face, head background. and that accidentally got automatically tagged as a head because I have the term head in this name. So in general, you'll notice in a lot of the example artwork, we only use head once, and for the other parts, we'll call it background or face or skin or something like that. And so I'm just going to click this to remove it, and now I should only have one instance of the head, which should make things work a little bit better. So most of the time, if you run through all three of those tips, that's going to solve 90% of the issues that we see in the forums. But if you're still having trouble, feel free to ask in the comments or forums, and we'll try to help you out as best we can. One question I've seen pop up from time to time is people looking for ways to make smoother head turns, basically combining the head turner behavior with the cycle layers behavior. So if you use the head turner just by itself, for example, I've got a front and a right quarter view. If I press the 1 key right now, it switches to that view. And this is great, but some people are wanting a smoother transition between those states. And yeah, there is a way to do that. So let's jump back to the master Photoshop file and see how to do this. So what I've done here is I've got my frontal and right quarter views. And frontal, as expected, has all the basic stuff you'd expect in a face, right eye, left eye, mouth, all of that. But the right quarter view is interesting because it's actually got 2 layers, 1, 2, and then a group called 3. So the number 1 is just the same assets from frontal moved over and then flattened into 1 layer. 2 has the move even more and still flattened. And then 3 is actually a group with the exact same stuff as frontal, so everything named and tagged the right way as expected, but it's basically our final face view that we want to land on. So this is a really powerful concept that when you have cycle layers, you can basically play a sequence and have that last layer be a new version of the face that you are transitioning to. All right, so there's a few things I'll have to do to get my character ready. First, on my right quarter, I'm going to add a keyboard trigger for 1. So when I press the 1 key, I'll switch to that view. And then for behaviors, I'm going to add cycle layers. And I'm going to want to make sure that this is set to forward and reverse and hold on last layer. And I'm probably going to do latch too, so I only have to hold the 1 key, press it once for it to latch in place, then press it again for it to go back. So let's try this with our character. I've got my head here, and I've got it, and then I press 1, and it does a 3-frame animation, and then I press it again, and it goes back. 1, and back. Now, one thing to note is doing it this way is going to be the fastest way to do it. If each of those frames was its own group, so each of those 1 and 2 were each a group and they had the eyes and mouth and everything like that, the face would run really slow. It gets really processor intensive if you're trying to basically have 20 different faces that you're moving between. So my recommendation is to flatten things in between to make the animation, make everything move a little smoother. So that's one way to do smoother head turns using head turner and cycle layers in Character Animator. By default in Character Animator, your performance is based off of what's happening in the webcam, right? So as I'm moving my pupils around and my eyebrows and all of that stuff, it's being translated into a performance for the character. But there are some fine-tuned controls, some alternative recording methods that you can use to give your character a very precise level of expressiveness and detail. So I'm going to show a couple of those right here. First off is under the eye gaze behavior. By default, camera input is selected. But if I turn this off and instead use mouse and touch input, then I can drag the mouse, and as I drag the cursor around, that's going to change where the eyes look, where the pupils are looking. Almost any recorded piece that I do, I'll start with my camera controlled performance, but to get that extra level of expressiveness, I'll do a pass with the mouse and touch input, and then you can blend those takes into each other to make it feel like one seamless performance. Lip sync is another area where you may want to hold a certain sound, a certain mouth shape for a longer period of time than the automatic lip sync happens. So right, by default, Character Animator is listening to my voice and is trying to put the best mouth shape per, when I'm saying at any given time. But that always, if you hold a particular thing, so if I say woo, it did it okay, but I might want to hold it, really fine tune that to get the mouth just precisely right. And so one way to do that is actually under lip sync, turn on keyboard input in addition to audio input. And so if I want to accentuate that particular moment, I can press the W key woo, and that's going to stick on that mouth. So remember, in your mouth, you've got all these different mouth shapes. If you tap on the keyboard the first letter of each of these, you will play that mouth shape. So A, D, A, D, E, F, L, M, O, R, S, U, and W will translate into mouth shapes. So if I press A or E or F or O or W, then those are going to override what I'm saying here and instead do the keyboard input. So every time, again, I'll go through my recording and I'll do a natural pass with just the voice, and Character Animator does a pretty great job 95% of the time. But for those particular moments where I need a specific mouth shape, I will turn on keyboard input and then record and time it just the right time, press and hold that mouth shape to get that right mouth at the right time. One pretty cool technique that you can use for your characters is this hand sketched look. So notice this character, the hair and lines all feel like they're kind of kinetic and moving at all times. Even the eyebrows and the pupils are doing that as well. So you get this really lively character that has a really interesting, unique style to it. So let's dig into the original Photoshop file and see how it's set up. So here we have the Photoshop file, and everything's set up as you would normally expect for a puppet, but you'll notice that a lot of these are, instead of just flat layers, they're groups with several variations inside of them. So for example, in this background folder, I've got layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. And all of these are drawn a little differently. So all I did was, with a Wacom tablet, I drew this first one, and then I changed that to 50% opacity. I made a new layer. I drew another hand sketch over top of that, changed that to 50%, and then drew a third one over top. And so because you're redrawing the same thing multiple times, you're never going to get it exactly perfectly the same, and so it's going to have kind of this live look. And as long as you're kind of tracing the previous lines, you'll kind of stay within the confines of your character and it'll give it that look. I recommend doing about 3 for each part. You could do more if you want a little bit more variety, but I'd say the minimum is probably 3. And notice I'm doing this for a lot of different things. So the mouth shapes move so fast that I didn't do it for each mouth shape, but for the neutral state, which you're going to see if no one is talking, I did that 3 layers for that state. Same thing inside the eyes, I did the pupil has 3 different states. Now notice the eyeball. This character is interesting because he actually he's only pupils. He doesn't have an eyeball per se. But what I did was I just made a white circle and I just changed the opacity for that to 0. So that's where the pupil is going to move around. That's kind of the confines of where it's going to look around, but you don't need to see that white eyeball, so it just kind of disappears. And then same with the eyebrows, they each have 3 layers. So let's go into Character Animator and see how we set this up. Alright, so inside Character Animator itself, what I did was select each of the groups that has the 3 frames of animation. So the pupils, the eyebrows, the neutral mouth, and the background. And then I just added a cycle layers behavior to them. And they all kind of start the same and look the same. They should start immediately, they should move from top to bottom, advance every 1 frame, cycle continuously. And one thing to note is to make this look really nice, you want to, same thing as I was saying about the stop motion animation earlier, you'd probably want to do 12 frames per second for this. And I'll show you, if I go to this and I click on this and see 12 frames per second, it's looking pretty nice. If I did this at 24 or something like that, it's going to go way too fast and jittery, and that just doesn't look very good. So I would suggest keeping it at 12. And I'm just doing a head here, but you can imagine a whole body sketched in this style as well, or little question marks that pop out, kind of give it this hand sketched look. You can even put one of these characters in After Effects on top of a sketchbook to make it feel like it's coming alive or that sort of thing. So there's a lot of creative possibilities with this sort of technique, and I'm going to be experimenting with it a little bit more with future characters, but I wanted to share kind of where those experiments are leading right now, and hopefully this helps you with your own creations. Alright, that's it for this month's episode. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or issues that come up when you're making your puppets, or have feature requests or bug reports, please go to the official Character Animator forums on Adobe's website. That's the best place to do that. And also, if you have cool puppets that you've made that you want us to consider featuring in the future community spotlight sections, please tweet them to me at OKSamurai or on the YouTube comments or something like that. But I think that's it for this month, so thank you for watching, good luck, and have fun.